Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Craft Cannabis TV. I'm here with a very special guest today. Very happy to meet and speak to you, Jacqui Ramage. Welcome.
Hello, how are you, Trenton?
I'm very good, thank you. All the better to be talking to you. We just had a quick chat off camera and there's some amazing information that you were sharing. So first of all, you're a pharmacist, but just give us a bit of insight into who you are and what your involvement in the cannabis industry is.
I am a pharmacist. I have been for about 25 years, so if you can do basic maths, makes me kind of hip and old. But I've been involved in every avenue of pharmacy that there possibly could be. And serendipitously, through a number of aligned events, came to be in the cannabis industry and get involved at a very early stage. And I'm very excited about it.
So you're being a bit stealth there. Like, how did you actually get involved? How did it start? Well, obviously, there had to be an interest that was sparked.
So I had breast cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2016. And every Tuesday in the chemo room, when I had chemo, everybody was talking about is where they were getting their oil from to help them with their nausea, help them with their pain, help them with their post-chemo pain. I'd always known a bit about cannabis, coming from a pharmaceutical perspective and a studying perspective. And if anybody who's ever been to varsity or college, or it's around you in a different, in a way, any way possible. I met a couple of people who were looking at after the new legislation, who were looking at licensing and regulation and compliance. And because I'm a pharmacist and I know a lot about generic regulation and compliance, they approached me to help and consult in this very field. And with it came a steep learning curve and an amazing network of amazing collaborative people.
So you effectively came in from the health angle, obviously with your background, and then sort of that obviously what you experienced and went through drew you towards that space.
Yes, very much so, because what was happening is I realized that I think with any prohibited substance is somebody was getting their oil to alleviate their cancer pain or nausea or emotional trauma that they were going through, for want of a better description, their PTSD, which we could talk about it another day, what they're using cannabis for in the PTSD war veterans in the USA. But it came about, I realized that there was no traceability for these products. So where were they getting them from? And that was the traditional of brothers, cousins, uncles, or I know a guy, or I know a girl, or I've got a number for you. And any Google machine search will come up with a number of places where you can get it, but there's only a number, and it's an anonymous number, or you're getting it from, well, I got it from my cousin, so it must be good, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a strange situation because there's this plant which we all know is hugely beneficial in many, many ways. Yet, even though there's legalization going on around the world, there are still many people who are having to get it via the back door, and you don't know what you're getting. So I want to unpack the regulation side of things. So you've been involved, or you are involved in regulation. You're busy trying to acquire a license at the moment, a grow license. Let's just I want to go back into the medical stuff, but I just want to understand a bit about your involvement in that and how licensing and legislation is working at the moment currently in South Africa.
So my take on it, and as I said, from a professional perspective and observing how the industry has unfolded, and as with any industry in its infancy, it unfolds hourly. Technology is almost a good parallel that I could give. We found ourselves in the technological era, that the technological industry has far preceded the regulations. So I used the example earlier when we were chatting, is that WhatsApp group guidelines only came out how many years after WhatsApp was around, because people were infringing. I think it's possibly human nature. And the cannabis industry at the moment in South Africa is very similar. We have a regulatory authority and a regulatory body who itself was going through a lot of changes when the Constitutional Court ruled in September 2018 on the private use, and then together with the Medicines and Related Substances Act, ruled that there were some guidelines and regulations that had changed and would change around cannabis. And that in itself is incredibly exciting, as you mentioned, for this plant that we, for thousands of years, have known. It's been politicized, it's been racialized, it's been monetized.
Demonized.
Demonized.
Lots of eyes.
All the eyes. You just have to read a little bit about the history of how it started, and it's mind-boggling that this amazing plant, things that it can do, and the levels and the layers and the dimensions. It's.
I mean, if you actually unpack the whole situation, it's actually quite dark. In terms of how it was regulated and the steps, especially in America, about how it was literally based around race and controlling population groups, which is mind-boggling. I also, I've read that this is the first, and you'll probably know this more than I do, but I've read that CBD and cannabis is the first drug that has ever been led by the general public, as opposed to the pharmaceutical industry going, here, you need this for this headache, you need this for the stomach ache. The general populace have gone, it's illegal, but it's working, we want it, you need to give it to us.
So it gives a very, very unique take on regulations. So your industry is essentially guiding regulations. And when you have a previously prohibited substance, what industry do you go to? What market do you go to? Where do you put your price point? Where do you put your boundaries? So it's great and it's exciting, but we have to look at other markets that have gone a bit ahead. So, for example, I always use the USA because I know they're ahead of a lot of stuff, and they're the big USA. But in my experience with doing business with them and being there and having a look at the industry, it's an industry to be taken seriously. And it's exciting to be part of, because you are becoming part of an industry that your family, people, peers look back in 20 years like they did at technology and say, look how far we've come. But with any previously prohibited substance that becomes regulated, you've got to jump through hoops. And often the regulators themselves aren't sure of what hoops to jump through. So you're in a space where you're retrospectively regulating an industry as opposed to prospectively. So that's why I was saying to you earlier, is I feel strongly about that, the community-driven collaboration, cooperation. Yes, we need different sectors. We need the pharmacists, the scientists, but we need the growers. We need the people who know the plant. We need the people who have experienced the plant, who have extracted from it, who have used machinery or rudimentary machinery that they've eventually trademarked. We need all the experts in the community to collaborate on it, as opposed to further defragment, like I said earlier, and put it in silos. And that's essentially what we want to stay away from.
And it could be very easily siloed, because you've got the recreational side and then you've got the medical side, and they're very different. But there is this intersection in the middle, where the skills are needed from both sides, and that blend and that intersection, I think, is hugely important. Let's just talk about licensing in South Africa, which, you hear all kinds of rumors. There's millions to get a license. You have to have all this, is it GMP testing facilities, and the barrier seems super high at the moment. And one of the things people often talk about is the fact that they've been growing cannabis in the Eastern Cape for decades, and they'll never be able to afford to bring on proper plants. What is your take on legislation in terms of that? And tell us a bit about getting a license in South Africa.
So you maybe must just sort of stop me, because I can digress very easily and I can sit here for days and chat. So just keep me focused on your question. So yes, I do, and I have read a bit and thought a bit about the people who've been growing it for ages, but it's what I said to you earlier, is we need to always be cognizant and careful of what we wish for. If you want a substance that has got so much potential to be regulated, even if for hundreds of years it was politicized and racialized and demonized, we're breaking that stigma. And with stigma breaking comes some sort of a payoff. So I like to see an optimistic view on that, is that we can take and utilize and incorporate that knowledge that those people have had in a previously underground industry. Pardon the pun, for want of a better cannabis roots pun, but an underground industry, and use their expertise. So this again comes to the collaborative, cooperative method of business, where you have investors who have money, people who have land, other people who have expertise, and you put them together.
I think that's the biggest challenge. Is, you've got investors who want return, and to be frank, a lot of them don't actually really care about community. They just want to make money, but getting a license seems to be a barrier. Tell us about your experience with that.
So getting a license, it seems it's perceived as a barrier because I would understand, you've just said just now, there's the medicine and the recreational parts that are melding, for want of a better loose description. So with your licensing anything is a barrier. Licensing any normal pharmaceutical, and I always use the example when I chat to people about aspirin. Disprin, aspirin, it sounds random, but it's from the white willow bark tree. It's also from a plant. In order for us to get the best benefits out of it, it needs to be taken from that tree in the best way possible and put into the best form in the best interest of the patients. I'm not going to make you suck on the bark of a tree, and I don't know what size I've pulled off the tree. I don't know how many llamas or lemurs or sloths pooped on that piece of tree, for want of a better, sorry, but that is the very, very truth and the nature of it. I don't know what conditions that tree was exposed to for me to professionally, I went into the profession because I want to professionally help you in the best way possible. I might be doing you more damage. And the first rule at least I think, my personal opinion, is people who go into the medical profession, the pharmaceutical profession, is to do no harm. And you want to be helped. And in a crisis situation, all the fluffiness taken away from it, you want the best for the patients. Back to the licensing, that's where it starts.
So quickly, are there different types of licenses? So if you're growing for medical and you're selling something for a medical condition, I totally understand there are serious regulations. If you're selling something for recreational use, should the same rules and regulations apply? Are they different? Are they being viewed differently?
So they're not being viewed differently, but you have to bear in mind that medicinal cannabis is only legal in South Africa at the moment. Recreational use outside of your private space is not, and that's where we have to differentiate between a lot of the laws that have been passed and the regulations that have been passed. SAHPRA has issued a public FAQ document that can be referred to. I can also give you the link if you want to add it on. It's very useful. It's very well written. There are some grey areas, but because of the retrospective versus prospective licensing that we really are trying to catch up on. But long answer to your short question, in that it still has to be the same. Medically here, to get a license, you have to make sure that you have traceability of your seed. There's not somebody coming over with the seed in their pocket, because then the very inception of that tree was illegal. So growing it you can have the cleanest floor and the cleanest building, but it was illegal. You have to have GMP, or good manufacturing practice. Essentially only starts from your processing space. So any fruit or vegetable that you might buy at your local supermarket has gone through some sort of regulatory process to be on your shelf.
But the GMP regulatory process is a lot more difficult for something medicinal as opposed to like a fruit and vegetable. It's a totally different ballgame. And surely if you're having to go through all these hoops and licensing is so complicated, then you're cutting out anybody that doesn't have any cash. You're cutting out people unless you have serious money, because setting these facilities is hugely expensive.
So that depends if you want to do indoor or outdoor. A lot of people are obviously for a cultivation license. A lot of the licenses to my knowledge, have been indoor greenhouse grow, because you can control it better, you can get a better yield and a better outcome. It still needs expertise. It's not expertise that you just get overnight. But I circle you back to the point where I said GMP only starts at processing. So before that, you are still subject to GACP or GAP, which is good agricultural and collecting practices, which your vegetables and your red peppers and your avos and your everything are subject to. You want to know that the avo that you're eating, that you're giving to somebody else, or your tomatoes or your lettuce, has gone through a process that's not going to hamper you. And
well, that's debatable. If you look at the amount of pesticides in fruit and vegetables, whether that is actually a system that works or not is debatable. But I'm digressing.
So yes, no, you're quite right. And again, it's a completely separate rabbit hole that I'm sorry that we only have a very limited amount of time, because I'm incredibly passionate about that very thing. Because cannabis is a plant, it is subject to GAP, good agricultural practices, whether that be indoor or outdoor.
And outdoor obviously has a different level of legislation and is easier in terms of licensing than indoor?
Not necessarily. Because our regulatory authority is our law enforcement body regulator, it still has to incorporate a lot of other people from a lot of industries. Them being law enforcement, they are very, very high on the security, which I can understand. If, again, I said previously, be careful what you wish for, is that in a regulated environment, if something this product is going to be going out, we need a strong level of security so that it doesn't go onto the prohibited market, because that's what we're now trying to bring to the fore, is that it's...
Which is very unlikely to work, because if you look at America and how big their black market is, because it's too expensive to get a license, etc., etc. What is your opinion on... I want to move on away from licensing. What is your opinion on Fields of Green and the Dacha couple and their stance in terms of, until the guy at the taxi rank can sell his cannabis out of a matchbox and has the right to do that, then their job is not done? What is your opinion on that?
So I've met Myrtle and... it's Jason. Is it Jason? Sorry, you might have dated that. Myrtle spoke at our 3rd national pharmacy conference in Sun City, and I had the pleasure of meeting her. I've listened to her before, but I haven't met her before. And she was a breath of fresh air in what was a very siloed environment with respect to my profession. And every conference is going to have its own energy and its own aura. And she came with this amazing energy where she said, at the end of her presentation, she said, "Thanks for listening to us ordinary criminals." You know, it was. But
what's your take on her? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for bringing me back. I think, again, I'm collaborative. It's community driven. We need the advocates, like the Dacha couple. We need the voice. I don't have the same energy and the same capacity.
But do you agree with their opinion? Because, you know, I know guys growing in the townships in their backyard who are sending their kids to school from 8 to 10 plants they grow. But if we overregulate, that's going to die.
Yes, I think, again, any extreme without a balance is not possible. So I don't think the overregulation at all, but we do have a duty to care for a community. So the balance between those is going to be essential.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who are putting models forward where you take your cannabis grown at home, you take it to some space and they were tested for you, give it a stamp of approval, SABS kind of vibes, approved. That seems to be the most sensible thing that I'm hearing at the moment. Let's as you're a pharmacist, I really want to extract some knowledge out of you a bit more on that level. Let's talk about CBD, the big buzz of CBD. What's your opinion? Does it work, first of all?
Yes, I think it does. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't have any iota of belief in the whole plant. And I think the layers of unpacking of the plant, the tip of the proverbial iceberg has not even been broken. Obviously, the States, we've mentioned it before, the States is quite ahead. They've been through these processes, and we can watch the trends. But yes, it is a very big buzzword. I think we need to be cautious, as we've previously alluded to, about balance. Not everything can be CBD infused.
Well, that's debatable by some people, but not everything should be CBD infused.
No. I think we need to be cautious. And again, from a pharmacist scientific perspective, I don't want my kids coming home having had CBD and THC Play-Doh at school that somebody's offered them, because that's genuinely what landed on my desk a couple of months ago, is a Play-Doh.
Wow.
Made of THC and CBD.
That is the craziest thing I've heard for a while.
Okay, so I know you're a dad, and I know you could resonate. Would you be happy with an untested THC, CBD?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the last time my kids had Play-Doh, my dog ate it, and it was full of salt, and the dog almost died. So probably better for it to have it with THC and CBD. But no, I think this is the challenge at the moment. There are just too many people that's planting CBD on everything, and in our country where we are, I'd say a lot more unregulated than developing countries. The whole sort of snake oil thing is happening. What would your advice be to somebody who wants to look for CBD? Where would they start?
I would start with asking the question for a laboratory test, a recent, valid laboratory test on the product, not a screenshot of the product with no date on it, because that's what I've seen. I mean, you name it, I've almost seen most of it. Ask for the source, ask for the lab report. Was it imported? Is it local? If it's local, what is the source? Where was it made? Was it made in somebody's garage or kitchen?
Well, there's nowhere really making it locally. Anybody that's selling CBD is importing the isolate mostly, you know.
They could, but if they want to, I'm giving away all my state secret here. If they wanted to, they could go to a third-party extractor or a third-party manufacturing company who already has a manufacturing setup. That's not illegal, but the hoops would start for them to have it parallel to be regulated. So do an application to the regulators. And that's all the products you see on the market. You see the caveat or the disclaimer that this product has not been registered by SAHPRA and has not been issued a number. But that doesn't mean that absolves you from not making it in your kitchen or your garage, because you are not doing it in a mildly sanitary environment or it doesn't have to be immediately GMP, but if you're outsourcing it to a third party, then that at least has to have some sort of a GMP or at least an operational license.
I think what's really important for people to remember who are dabbling in CBD or want to get into CBD is it's very, very serious. You know, when we first ran the craft cannabis sessions, we had an audience, and at the end we did an open Q&A, and about 5 or 6 people stood up and expressed how, you know, cannabis as a whole was helping them, you know, from anxiety to depression, whatever it was. And it was really serious, and it hit us quite hard that there's a big responsibility. You can't just make CBD in your garage and go and sell it. It just, in my opinion, is just not right. It has to be tested, because you are playing with people's health. And I think there's a bit of a lack of understanding of how imperatively important that is at the moment, especially when people are just trying to get in the cash in this green rush.
The issue is it's becomes a bit of a feeding frenzy, right? And so we're also feeding the stigma that this plant has had its whole life. Now we want to cash in on it, but we're going to make it quickly in our garage. We're going to do a quick turnover, and by the time the regulators catch us, we've made our money and we can move on to the next thing. So we don't want to play into that stigma. If we want to give it its place in the proverbial sun, or its proverbial place in the sun, and we want it out from there, then we must embrace everything that comes with. And it's going to come with a little bit of regulation. You want to know that your product is quality, safe, and effective, and consistent. You want to take that paracetamol tablet that you take for your headache, or that lavender oil that you put on your pillow. You know that 2 drops helps you sleep. You know that 1 paracetamol takes away that headache.
But it's on both sides, not just the medical side. You know, if it's a recreational, you know, you don't want to smoke something that's going to make you paranoid. You know, so I think it's the whole thing needs.
and sorry to interrupt you, but what your capacity is. And that is where the whole, again, I keep on saying it over and over, the collaborative, the cooperative, we need everybody from the industry to have their place in the sun as well. I don't mean to steal it all for themselves and have the social media glory or whatever it is now. I'm old-fashioned, so I don't sort of go with that. But I believe strongly enough in an industry and my profession to know that you need a village and you need a community around you. And to truth be told, if that's what the plant is going to do, it already has, and it always has. And I think that's probably why it's a completely different conversation. It was so politicized because it did not segregate people and it did not separate people.
I do love that about the industry is, you can be at an event and there'll be a Rasta standing next to a guy in a 3-pin suit, and the different characters. It's a very integrated, open community, because I think the majority of people, I'd like to hope, that are somewhere involved in cannabis do have a love for cannabis. They do love to recreationally, because it is a bonding experience. Just quickly, you've obviously there are very few experts in the cannabis industry in South Africa because we're still very new to it. I would consider you to be certainly somebody that is heading that way. You were in the States at MJ BizCon and another conference you were talking about. Just give us a bit of insight into those trips, because I was in LA a few months ago and it's mind-blowing what's happening over there. What did you learn, and was it inspiring?
The US, it's bigger and better for a reason, but they really are streets ahead in terms of where they're going federally and with their state laws. I think there were 11 other states that now just got their licenses. Amazing. MJ BizCon, it is the biggest and the most renowned.
Give me some facts, please, some stats.
Yes, cannabis event. So it runs twice a year. April and December. I was there in December. It's from the 11th to the 13th of December. I was there for an advanced cultivation summit the day before. It was a full day of cannabis experts from all over the US.
You were telling me how many stands there were.
Yes. So the expo is a 3-day expo. It's 1,500 exhibitors, 55,000 people over those 3 days through the doors. And excuse me, you might notice I don't wear a fancy watch, but my phone does by default follow me around. And the Friday, which was my most busy day, was 18,446 steps.
It's a long way. What is that in kilometers?
Not sure, haven't done the math. You would think
it's quite a few.
As a pharmacist, I would have, but it was mind-blowing. I didn't even get to all the stands, but when you want to see an industry taken seriously, that was it. And I came back I didn't need a renewed confidence, but I came back with an accelerated extra confidence in the industry in South Africa. And everybody can always do better. I'm not saying we want to do better than the US, but we want to learn from where they might have made mistakes. That's where we can make our prospective regulations as opposed to our retrospective regulations. And then we're not upsetting people. We're not then going back on our word, or then it becomes collaborative. If you're getting all your information from people who have been there before.
Absolutely. And I think it's imperative to learn from people who've been there before, but at the same time make sure that we're not cutting and pasting, because we're a totally different economy, a totally different culture. Africa has massive potential to grow, but we really need to make sure that we learn from guys who have made mistakes, but also implement our own methodologies that work for our environment. I could probably talk to you all night, but we don't have time. So thank you so much for your time. We really think you're doing some amazing things in the industry, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I could sit here the whole week and talk to you about it. It's my passion, it's my pleasure, and I really, really hope to sit on this couch with you in a year's time and see how far we've come.
Yeah, the future is bright and green. Craft Cannabis TV, we're out.